Pattie Dale, thank you so much for being willing to come on. I've been excited about this conversation for a while. You've got a really powerful background and you've solved some really cool problems in really challenging industries. And then you went and wrote a book about the evolution and journey to get there, which I've been interested in because, just as a quick backdrop, I'm 41 and almost every single one of my friends over the last 5 years, and granted that takes us right back to COVID, but still over the last 5 years, almost every single one of us has made a career change.
Mhm.
And we went through this very painful process of picking a career path, investing in it, working hard to get there, and then arriving at success and realizing, dang, this doesn't really serve me very well. Maybe it's not what I was meant to do in the first place. And your book doesn't go directly to that point, but I think it's adjacent enough that we should pick up on that thread. Maybe you could tell the audience a little bit about your journey from ordinary to extraordinary and how that's been able to be impactful in the world since you wrote the book.
Thank you, Eric. And I'm sorry that you all are going through these transitions, but they will make you better. And may
Oh,
I
yeah.
just tell you, it will not be the last transition you go through. And that's the beauty of a life. You know, when I talk about my career, I talk about it in numbers of hours. The typical career is 90,000 hours, and I'm at 80 something thousand hours. And so you've been doing this a while, but you got a while to go. You're only you're about 2/3 of your way.
I
But
can't tell if I
mine's pardon?
knowing I can't tell if I like the idea of it being 90,000 hours or if that's daunting. I have mixed emotions to the reaction of 90K hours. It's interesting.
And that's exactly the response I love because you don't just talk about it in terms of 40 years and a gold watch anymore, right? I mean, we do reinvent ourselves and you remember Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point. 10,000 hours to get expert at something. So for the young ones that I talk to that are just starting out on their career, I remind them of that. You've got to get good at work before you go conquering the world. Settle down, settle in, hold on. And oh, by the way, that first 5 years isn't going to be comfortable. But Eric, as you and your friends have transitioned into other parts of work, you know, sometimes you start over. But that's okay. As long as you're still growing muscles, you don't have to give anything away when you switch gears. But back to the question you started me with, Ordinary to Extraordinary. I just published that book 2 years ago. Actually, Forbes called me and said, "We think you've got a message that would resonate right now." And the message they wanted me to talk about was, how does a girl from a small southern town who didn't go to an Ivy League school, who didn't even, Eric, have an MBA, how did you end up at the top of the charts at Humana? Before I left, I ran a $3 billion business for them, was president. And I sat back and I thought, with all the social media doom scrolling that the younger workers or the mid-age workers are going through right now, thinking that everybody else has a perfect life and a perfect career, they need to hear that no, they don't. No, they didn't. And by the way, if I can get there, you can get there. So come with me on this 90,000 hour journey I'm making and let me tell you some things that helped me. And I want to be there to help you all along the way. So that was the point of the book. And now I get to talk about it with very smart people like you and your audience. And hopefully people leave with something that helps them have an extraordinary career, get that one step closer to an extraordinary career filled with purpose. And I think that's what you were hitting on when you said we get to a point and we go, wow, is this really all there is? This doesn't scratch the itch.
Thank you for sharing. So I got to ask, like, I know the answer to the question of how did you go from where you came from and through the process to the top of Humana? How did that happen? I know it took a book to really answer the question, but maybe you could share what's the first step of
Yeah,
somebody trying to move in that type of direction?
I love that question. It is the first thing is know thyself. So have
Mm.
you had your aptitudes tested, Eric? Not strength finders necessarily. Maybe what color is your parachute? I had my aptitudes tested. My parents tested my aptitudes probably too young. I was only 14 or 15. And aptitudes are those innate strengths, God given strengths. And we don't grow more aptitudes over our lifetime. We grow skills from those aptitudes. And then you hope that when you get to that place and you've built up your skills like you have, then you learn, wow, I'm going to point these skills at this place because I'm really passionate about changing this, inventing this, creating this. And then at some point you discover your purpose. So back to the beginning, I had my aptitudes tested at 15, and it was this two or three things popped to the top. I was good at analytics, and that made sense because I love math. I love order to chaos. Give me a messy environment, and I will make sure I get it in order. A friend of mine said, "You like to mow the tall grass so you can see where you came from." And then I love being able to help or persuade somebody to move over to a different decision if it's a win-win. I had to learn that later in life. Okay, so all that together, Erik, and what the aptitude folks did was to tell you, the testers said, we're going to tell you the perfect career path for you. I know you're only 15, but we can tell you what it is. And you know what mine was, Erik, at 15 years old, what I was told? Go be a great life insurance salesperson. Oh my gosh. I was mortified. I mean, I didn't know what mortified meant back then, but I'm sure I was disappointed. But do you know what, Erik? 10 years later, I was Mutual New York's in their top tier insurance salespeople. So I resisted
Yeah.
aptitudes until I realized what I can do with aptitudes. And I've been using them ever since. And every time I get a little bit uncomfortable in my career environment, I dust off those aptitudes and I go, which one am I not using? And is this the right role, or is it time for me to move into something else, either lateral or a promotion? So that's how my career was like a Christmas tree. It went wide and then it would go narrow and I might get a raise and then or a promotion and then it'd go wide again. And it just ended up like a Christmas tree. And finally I got to the top.
I love that as a clear first step. Know thyself. And there's a lot of tools you can do to do it, right? You use the terminology aptitudes, and then there's a million different tools that are out there that are all largely well constructed: CVI, DISC, strength finders, and they all help you identify some of these things in meaningful ways. Whichever one you believe in or support probably isn't as important as you going through the process of trying to figure
Exactly.
out, where do I lean more? And I think there's a
Mhm.
potential that someone could hear this and resist the temptation to believe you're here for a purpose, or you have a calling, or you have something. Fine, resist that all you want. At the end of the day, there's stuff you're better at and worse at. There's things you like more and like less. And the more you steer, what I hear you saying is the more you steer closer to the stuff that you're naturally better at, that naturally fulfills you, that you naturally enjoy, the better your career is going to go for you.
I
Is there
totally
a,
agree.
sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, totally agree.
Is there a, in your experience, because you talk a lot about reverse mentoring as well. I think you have a lot of humility you use to approach this in the real conversations you have with anybody from any generation, but especially people newer in their career. Are there any pitfalls to that? Are there traps that people could be aware of that kind of might hang them up or stall them or delay them or unnecessarily bog them down that they could move through faster?
I think that I think people are hitting a wall in career earlier. And again, I think
Mm,
it's that this generation has had a lot of help and they have been surrounded with a lot of care, the Gen Zers, and
mhm.
work doesn't care. Work has a job to be done. And I don't mean that literally. I'm in an environmental law firm right now, and they care about me. I mean,
Sure.
but you are solely almost accountable for what you deliver. Your leader has a lot to get done in a day, and they're not going to surround you with a velvet cloak.
Mm,
So sometimes they're hitting a wall because they have to hit the wall. They have to feel like uh, okay, I get it. If I do this, it hurts. Just like we put our hand on a stove when we were little. If I don't turn in what I'm accountable for on time and in a great format, it's not going to go over well. And those words are going to hurt. And I'm not used to feeling words that hurt.
Yeah.
So next time I'll get it in on time and prepared the way she wanted it prepared. So I don't know if that helps, but part of what I tell folks is it's going to hurt. Get used to being uncomfortable for a while because you've
Yeah.
got 10,000 hours before you figure out how to do it. And then you'll get better and better, but then you'll get a great promotion and you'll go back to, I'm learning. And the
Yeah.
other thing I would say, Erik, is when you get to that enviable but scary place where you look around the room and those that you are leading are smarter than you, take a deep breath and say, wow, I've made it because I'm here to be the symphony director, to
Right.
take the cacophony and turn it into an orchestra that's giving beautiful music. But it doesn't mean I know how to be an expert violinist, but I know how to blend it all together. So I gave you a lot in that. I went from a child on a stove all the way up to a conductor.
Well, that's there's a couple jump off points because of it, and I love that. So I'm going to pick one, and then I'm going to come back to the other. The one I'm going to come back to is the symphony,
Mhm.
because I really agree with your sentiment that that's the point of arrival for mature leadership, is the acknowledgement and humility and passion to recognize good.
Mhm.
Finally in a position where everybody is brilliant and better at me, and my job isn't to do any of their job because I couldn't. It's so liberating to arrive at that moment, but it requires some mature perspective. I want to come back to that one. You've said something twice now that I think is really, really impactful. And I thought you might feel this way, which is why I asked the question. You said that be prepared for some discomfort.
Mhm.
Be prepared for some friction. Be prepared for some bumps, some people who don't not care, but also may not express care in the way that you have been conditioned to receive it and feel that you should receive it in. And that's reality. I think you're
Yes.
right in that Gen Z, millennials, and now Gen Alpha coming into the workforce have maybe a harder time recognizing that and squaring with that. But it isn't even just a generational thing. It isn't even an age thing. It's really anytime you're moving into something new
Mhm.
and uncomfortable, you should anticipate a period of discomfort. It makes me think of like the S curve, the transition curve, right? You go through uninformed optimism, and then at some point or another, the crisis of meaning and the crisis of engagement hits. It doesn't matter what
Right.
generation you are. It doesn't matter how old you are, how experienced you are, how good you are. You will live that curve.
Yep.
So, what are some of the tips and tricks for somebody to recognize the difference between discomfort that's helping us grow and discomfort that's a signal that we're misaligned, that this
Mhm.
isn't the aptitude aligned execution I intended? Because we can get it wrong. In fact, we need to get it wrong several times. So, any words of wisdom about how to distinguish between discomfort I should grow through and discomfort I should acknowledge as a signal that, man, maybe I'm headed down the wrong road anyway?
So thank you for a great question. I'm going to go back to the aptitudes and go back and look what is causing this discomfort. A, is it fear? Because we can all be scared at work also, right? Because we've got a big presentation later on, or I'm not sure that my boss gets me or whatever. So is it fear? And if it is fear, face it, write it down. What's going on in there that's causing you to be fearful? And do you need to have a very measured, fact based, with a sprinkling of emotion, conversation with your leader to say, I think I disappointed you last time when I did this. We've got a big work project ahead of us. Let's make sure we're on the same page and that I'm doing what you need me to do. I mean, face it and be humble and come with humility. You're going to have to do that a million jillion times, right? So face that. Look at your aptitudes. Are you using all of them? Is it comfortable for you to express all of them? And maybe not all of them in a workday, but I'll tell you something that happens with aptitudes, Erik. If I have a musical aptitude and I never express it, I will be uncomfortable in life. I will
Mm.
not know why, and I will blame it on a myriad of things. But it's simply that I have not played the piano or been able to sing or dance. If I have a strong aptitude I'm not using, if I'm an athlete and I'm cooped up all winter, you know how that feels.
Oh, yeah.
You and that's all about not being able to express your aptitudes. So look at those that you would choose as your that are your aptitudes, those things that chose you, and make sure you're expressing them all. And then finally, I would say, is there something in the environment? And Eric, I've been in work environments that day two, I realized it was not a fit. I was not right to be in this role. And guess what? It was my fault because I was seduced by title and by money and didn't look at the whole programming effect. And it was destructive for everybody. It was traumatic for me to have to leave. It was traumatic for the company that thought they found somebody. So make sure you look at your environment and that you are not, that's not causing your discomfort. And if it is, as you said, am I misaligned? Do I need to make the break?
Really like that the direction of your answer to how that is communication. What I heard you say was you got to have some conversations in there. Without that, one, it's kind of difficult to know yourself in a vacuum. So,
Yes.
you've talked in your social content in your life about having coaches and mentors and even
Mhm.
reverse mentorship, right? Having people who you trust to give you input who could say, no, you got to tough this one out, kid, or dude, you're in the wrong field. Like you just need someone who can speak that truth into your life. And you also probably need the ability to articulate it to your boss. The way
Yeah.
you said, "Hey boss, I think I let you down about this last
Yeah.
thing," right? And that's a skill on its own. The ability to acknowledge that humbly and then communicate that effectively are really impactful. But what they're all steering towards is something bigger than happiness.
Mhm.
They're steering towards something bigger than satisfaction or even delayed gratification, right? Because we can make the argument that there's a heck of a lot of people who've delayed gratification and make a ton of money in particular fields, law being one of them, where it's
Mhm.
just like, I'm deferring all of my happiness or something else. How do you articulate the difference between the short-term satisfaction and short-term happiness versus the long-term like the joy of true alignment and fulfillment? I'm struggling for the word here. How would you say that?
So I was once in my 40s, Eric, and I went to that place of transition, and what was not comfortable in my environment or the way I was feeling about work. And I boiled it down to I was at that place where I wanted a perfect combo platter of joy and peace.
Hmm.
And peace doesn't mean uh, sleeping. I mean, peace to me means I am at peace that I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing, given the gifts that I have, given the passion I have for whatever that is. I am doing that in the moment. But joy is so much deeper than happy. Happy is fleeting. Joy is something, I mean, you can feel joy and sad at the same time, right?
Absolutely. Mhm.
And so I, it's an evolution. You don't get there in your 30s. I don't even know if you get there in your 40s. It's an evolution. It is one of the most wonderful things about longevity in the human brain is that it moves from a place of fluidity, which is I'm in the moment, I'm great at innovating, I'm great at creating, and I need the energy from doing that and creating things new, to a place of I've got some pathways that I know I can go down, and they're not fearful, they're not scary. I know the return on the investment for going down that thought pathway, and there's a piece to that. There's not a I, I just I'm reading Arthur Brooks' Strength to Strength. Highly recommend it, and he talks about this that there's a time in our lives where even as a musician, there's a time in my life where I am at the best in terms of kind of new and creative music, but then I can keep getting better with music that I've been doing or similar music that I've been doing. So I don't know, I might have gone off on a tangent on you there, but hope that makes sense.
It does. I mean, and I like I like you connecting it back to music in that way because a lot of times some of this stuff feels a little heady, right? Like it feels like this theory and psychology, which is all interesting, but also kind of hard to tangibilize for a lot
Mhm.
of people. But when we bring it back to the physical,
Mhm.
music, sports, writing,
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
that we all can kind of connect with. I think the truths shine through. And I've often wondered about great bands. How do you say that play the same damn song again and again and again at a concert and bring the energy every time? Like, that's insane. I change
Yeah.
my speeches a lot because I don't want to give the same speech every single time, right? So how do you find joy in delivering the same thing at a high level again and again and again? And I think the answer is rooted in kind of what you said. Sometimes I don't as much, but it's a
Yeah.
season to come back to it. And there's a, if the closer you all are to that ebb and flow in your own reality, the easier it might be to show up and play the same song joyfully again and again, or to be honest about it. No, this isn't a joyful time, but I'm still going to bring it. And that's okay.
And guess what? The minute you bring it and it is filling a need out there, you're going to feel all that joy all over again. And that's
Yeah.
how the bands do it. I mean, they get a house full of uh, acceptance, and
Yeah.
they go, "Oh my gosh, that just fired everything up in this brain, and I'm going to play this like it was 30 years ago." And there you go. And we can do that with work. I mean, we can do that with the with what we have honed in on as our purpose through work. And as long as it is a needed purpose and something that makes us walk out of the building every day or turning off our device every day and saying, that felt good. I gave back. For me, I gave
Yeah.
back more than I took. And that's a happy dance day for me, a happy dance. And that should be what all of us feel when we come to work, right? I gave back more than I took.
Yeah. Let's steer in that direction. I'm going to come back again to the symphony. I haven't forgotten about that, but you just brought up a really interesting point that I think is difficult to articulate for corporations. And again, going back to generational differences, something that I think is misunderstood right now. There is deep meaning as a human in contributing to society. And we tend to call that contribution work, and it tends to have a contractual relationship with money, et cetera. But it's deeply rooted in I will be filled up by giving. And not just by giving something, but by being a party to witnessing someone receiving. That's the musician
Mm,
whose real product isn't a song, it's the impact they have by when someone listens to the song. That's probably what drags them from, oh God, I'm playing the same song again, to, oh man, I just lit this room on fire and here we go.
yeah.
And we all, I shouldn't say we all have, I hope most people have lived that and experienced that degree of satisfaction. And yet, I think we're in a culture right now, at least in North America, generationally, and especially as AI tools take off more and more, where we're steering in a direction where there's an underappreciation of work.
Mhm.
And that's kind of fair in a sense of drudgery. Like if your job is genuine drudgery and it's going to be replaced by automation in the near future, I think that's a reasonable thing to feel.
Mm.
But it could be easy in that moment for a person who has that drudgery job or who maybe
Mm.
doesn't have a mature perspective of the human depth that's required for us to fulfill, to give, to participate, to add value. What words of wisdom would you cast for someone who's struggling to make sense of why work's so freaking important when I can just be an influencer or use AI or hope for a social policy that gives me a paycheck every month instead of having to go earn it? What's the deep rooted truth someone in that position might need to hear?
90,000 hours. How do you how do you even envision that boring train ride across a desolate landscape with no sunrise and no sunset and no cloud and no animal? You're just on this 90,000 hour train ride. That would snap me out of it in a second. I mean, life is short. Even though, and you're going to have 90,000 hours doing something that you don't want to do. I read a great book, Joy Span, the other day, and it's about making sure that in your lifespan, you have just as much of a joy span. And if we're spending, unless we're independently wealthy or waiting for that social, you mentioned the social check, then we've got to work. And why do you want to work at something that is just so lackluster and uh, it doesn't give you any energy? Okay, so then you're going to say to me, well, some people have no choice. Well, that is exactly right. Sometimes you have to put in the time, but keep moving forward, one foot in front of the other, and then I started out as a life insurance salesperson, right? And then another ring came my way, and I grabbed that ring. And then the next one came and I grabbed it. And it wasn't, these weren't magnificent, huge leaps. I told you I was like a Christmas tree. So if you're in a drudgery job, cast your eyes forward and figure out what your next move is.
Mm.
And you might have to do 10,000 hours in the drudgery, but have a vision of where that next step is. And what do I need to do in terms of my skill sets to recreate, to level up, to re-educate, to get into that next role? Don't settle. Do not settle. Train ride, 90,000 hours. Think
Yeah.
about that.
I think what you're tying this to is just this hard reality of life. And that is like, look, you can think it's drudgery, you can think you don't want to do it, and all that might be accurate. And at the same time, you're still on the train.
Yeah.
So, unless you have independent wealth, or unless you're crossing your fingers for this some other outcome to give you the ability to live the life the way you want to, you're responsible for that. So, like, square with reality. And if you're going to have to do it, you might as well do something that's interesting or valuable or compelling instead of being stuck in the drudgery. And there's a lot of agency in that I think is a great centralized message to that. That's awesome. Okay, let's go back to the symphony now, because
Okay.
we talked a lot about the individual who needs to mature through this. But you mentioned that symphony place, that mature leadership arrival point where you look around and go, oh my gosh, does anybody in here know that I'm the dumbest one in the room?
Yeah.
Because I kind of hope not. But that's an arrival point, and I suspect you lived that. I'd love to hear a little bit about your own journey to getting to there. And maybe we can then
Yes.
extrapolate some of the lessons a leader should take from that. But like, what was it like for you to go from, to realize that moment? What was that like?
Oh, Eric, I can so remember my father saying to me when I got that first nice big promotion. I was moving to New Jersey with AT&T headquarters when I was with AT&T. And he said to me, honey, you need to listen more than you talk for about 30 days. You are not the smartest person in the room. They have been there, they have been doing this. Learn. And you can't always talk and learn at the same time. And that stuck with me. And I have coached others when they're new. If a new leader comes to me, I will coach the team and say, let her soak. Give her 30 days to soak, and then let's let her activate. But she's got a lot to learn before she can activate effectively. Because if I come in and just start doing stuff without the texture, without the history, I can alienate my team very quickly. I can really mess something up. So those words were magnificent. And directionally, they kept me in a really healthy place with every new assignment. And I've had a million new assignments where I was, I don't know, I don't, I know how to be a business person. I know how to um, build a business model or repair a business model, but not until the smartest people in the room tell me their feelings about it all. And then I can sit back and say, okay, um, Mr. Bass Player, you're coming in way too early. And the trumpet, you missed a couple of stanzas back there. Um, I'm trying to bring it back to your music, but ultimately, then you go, wow, this sounds great. And guess what? Every team member feels better because they're invested in the knowledge that they are the smartest person in the room when it comes to this space or when it comes to this space. That's a good feeling. Agency, you called it.
Yeah. Your dad sounds like a wise guy, and that was
Yeah.
phenomenal advice to give you. I had the good fortune of living through an experience like that, where a CEO came into our company. His name was John Malloy. Shout out to John Malloy. He was the
Uh,
CEO of Alec for a number of years and is now on the board there. And John came in and did exactly what you described: 30, 60 days, riding along, listening, asking questions. And it seems like logically, the bigger the organization, the more you have to absorb before you want to activate, because you genuinely could be disrupting something that's well intentioned that just hasn't manifested, and that's logical. What's less logical, but has to be harder to live through in that moment, is the ability to resist the urge to activate. Because
Mhm.
there's this weird, we talk about this a lot in the leadership work that I do. There's this weird moment as a leader where you transition from a doer, where you've been rewarded, your dopamine has been rewarded, your social gratification, your personal brand has all been built on what you do.
Yeah,
And yet then you shift into this role where actually you really should do significantly less. But all of your feedback loops, all of your human value receptors are wired to feel value based on activity, right? And this is why we see a lot of new leaders hyper present in every meeting, doing too many things when they really need to pull back and do less. And it isn't because the company needs them to do less, it's because they have to reset their identity of who they are. So living in
exactly.
that moment is hard. Maybe you could
It
talk a
is.
little bit like, what is it like to go for 30 or 60 days where typically by then you should have done some stuff and you shouldn't do anything in that moment? What's that like as just an individual to live through?
So I prepare for that, having been in that discomfort and having been in that transition of what did I do today? I just listened. Gosh, that's no good. But I wasn't just listening. I was learning, learning, learning. But but I love building a 30, 60, 90-day plan for my first 90 days. And there's a great book, Your First 90 Days. And it starts with my conversation with my leader. Who am I accountable to? And it may be the board, but it may be a CEO, a COO. But what do they have to accomplish in 90 days? And then thinking about what I'm going to be doing, mine better ladder up to that, or I'm already starting at a bad place. But first, understanding how my leader is going to be judged in 90 days allows me then to have a bit of a guidepost on what I'm listening for and looking for. So that sort of supercharges my learning and gives it direction. And then documenting, what did I learn today? But one whole list is just one whole page is just a question. I don't understand. I don't understand. And then hopefully I'm in my 60 days checking off all those things I didn't understand. And then I start building a business plan in my first 60, 30, 60, 90. I mean, I had a structure, but I really start putting here's what I know I need to deliver by the 91st day, by the
Mm.
120th day. So I get a bit methodical with it because it tamps down the imposter syndrome. Let's
Mm.
call it. How did I get here when all these people are so much smarter than I am? I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why they hired me. Do they know why that tamps that down because I'm taking control of my learning plan, my prep plan.
I like, again, going back to that word agency, that does give you, you feel like you are the agent of change in there. And just the first step to doing it is I've got to understand the situation better. I
Yes.
picture that manifesting as a series of questions or even hypotheses that I'm trying to figure out. How does
Yeah.
this work? And until I know the answer to that question, how could I possibly make a good recommendation or steer someone or anything along those lines? That makes sense to me. Okay. So let's try to combine the two. The individual who is on a 90,000 hour journey, who's maturing through discomfort, who maybe has a sense of self and could therefore articulate what they're trying to align with, which aptitudes they feel like they're trying to steer towards, and maybe they couldn't. You've got that individual being led, and then you've
Mhm.
got a leader who may have the wisdom to 30, 60, 90, the way you just described. They may be in the C suite, but let's be honest, probably not. There's only so many
Mhm.
roles like that. Quite often you're in a middle management or director, or maybe you lead through layers, maybe you got a small team. What should a leader do who's observing their team and recognizing not everybody here has alignment on the aptitude?
Mhm.
And we have some gaps around self-awareness that are really preventing people from steering into the skills that would help them maximize. And we've got some people who, frankly, once they figure out their aptitude, should not be here.
Right.
Right? I'm not trying to fire them yet, but this is
Yeah.
misalignment. Why should we even? What should a person do if they could step back and observe their team in that lens? What are some of the
Yeah.
first actions you would recommend to a leader in that position?
I want to tell you a story, and I think people learn best sometimes by stories. So when I took my first leadership role, my first big leadership role with Humana, I came into a team. that didn't want me there at all. Most of them. Why? Because I was from outside the industry. I've been a stranger in a strange land many times, but people see things in you, Erik, that you didn't see in yourself, and they put you, John Malloy put you in places that you might not have raised your hand for. And thank goodness for those people, and may we be those people. Um, but I was no background in insurance, and there were pretty heavily steeped career in insurance people on my team. So I had real dysfunction, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I had a great leader who said, "This is a marathon, not a sprint. Take your time in making decisions. So if I see somebody that I don't think the aptitude is going to get them there, let's see what they would be good at. And is there another place to save them on the team? If I see somebody whose just attitude uh, is so hostile to me, which is a foreign thing for me, what do I do with them? What am I doing that is triggering them to have such a bad feeling about me?" So I had all this stuff, but I had a very supportive leader. And I read Patrick Lencioni's Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And I brought in a wonderful outside coach. And for 2 days, we just put it all on the table. And we acknowledged that Pattie Dale Tye isn't the smartest person in the room, but she's the one that's been picked to lead. And you all, by nature of that, have been asked to follow. If you
Mhm.
can't do that, that's okay. Let's begin to look inside this big, beautiful company and find your next space. Nobody left, and we all matured. And probably the first person left after 4 years, the next person after 5. So a natural attrition cycle. But
Mhm.
it took three things. Number one, a boss that had my back, a leader that had my back, and may we always be that, and maybe we always deserve that. It took me being comfortable going outside the natural environment to find someone who's smarter at me than than anybody else, and I did that. And then the wisdom of a great writer who's been there, done that, seen it. And so I will always bring different pieces of cake batter to the cake while it's baking in hopes that it'll be better every time.
I think great writers, like I think Patrick Lencioni is, and I think one of the things that he does well, and arguably one of the things that you do in your book really well as well, is um, neither of you made this stuff up. You just observed it to be reality and wrote about it. Right? What you captured is truth. You didn't go make something up as a fantasy tale and sell a theory. It was like, well, I've observed this. I
Yeah.
know this is true, and I'm just going to put a little structure to it and organize it in a way that people can digest and act on.
Yes.
And so the first foundation in those five dysfunction of a teams is build trust.
Yeah.
And you articulate this situation where you come in with zero or even net negative trust just by
Hmm.
sheer virtue of external person, host of other factors socially, potentially. I doubt you had done anything individually or even as a corporate citizen in a different company to earn disfavor or distrust, but it wasn't there to
Right.
begin with.
Right.
If someone observed that, what do you do? How do you build trust
Gosh.
when you didn't even do anything to burn it specifically?
Right. Um, what a great question, and what a challenge we will go through, all of us, because um, you know, Erik, when you walk through the doors of work, usually, when you turn on your laptop to start your day and start interacting, you move into survival mode. Can't help it. I mean, this is not unlike the Great Migration, right? I've got to hunt and kill and nurture, feed my family with what that's a, a, I love Africa. So I think that's a good analysis or a good comparison. But you move into survival mode. And one of the things that I stopped doing was moving into survival mode. I moved into a mode of giving back to move forward. I moved into a mode of generosity. It works better in my head. It gave me a great dopamine rush. You can do generous things over and over and over again in a workday. And then you stop thinking about yourself and your own survival and wondering, tapping into you, my work partner, who for whatever reason doesn't trust me. Let's break that down. What am I doing that is causing you to not be comfortable with me? Because I need you to be comfortable with me. And that's, you know, let's start there. What's happened? And even if it's I remind you of your second grade teacher, let's get it out on the table and
Yeah.
talk about it because I need you and I hope you need me so that we can succeed together. So I start looking through a lens of generosity as opposed to self-survival. And that's just a, a comfortable, calmer place from which to solve a problem, in my view.
It makes me immediately think back, the most formative book that I've ever read, the one that literally changed everything about how I've thought about life and leadership at the earliest stages of my life, was written by the Arbinger Institute, and it's
Huh?
Leadership and Self-Deception. Are you familiar with that book at all?
I am. I'm gonna remind myself to write that down. It's a
It
great book to for refresh.
I've bought, I couldn't tell you how many copies of that because I've given away an enormous number of copies of that to people because it literally had the biggest impact in my life. And it's an
Yeah.
example tactically of caring enough about the human across from you to figure out what's going on in their world such that you could be an effective influencer of them in a positive way. And just what it made me immediately think about. I love that methodology, give back to move forward.
Mhm.
So some of that generosity we can manifest and we can think of pretty easily.
Mhm.
What, some of it's hard.
Mhm.
Like you had somebody in your career, maybe not at Humana in this example, but you had someone in your career that you didn't want to, that the impulse was like, you know what, forget that guy. I don't, there's just no way there wasn't some adversarial situation where it was just not easy to figure out how to give back. Could you maybe share
Mhm.
some of the less obvious ways you can give back to somebody when, especially when you really don't want to, because they are just antagonistic or difficult?
Ah, yeah. First of all, I prepare for that, and a couple of things I do. I don't want to continue to have this agita when I see this person walk in the room, or I know they're going to, be difficult with me in a meeting. So I really begin thinking about when to encounter these people when they are at their best, or when they are not at their, or when they don't encounter them when they're at their worst. Not on a Monday morning. If this is somebody that is antagonistic to you, don't do a meeting with them on a Monday morning. You're
Hmm.
just trying to get your head back around work, right? You had a moment of freedom, and so do think about that. And then from the generosity perspective, I like to ask how can I help you with your work? And it may be that they have never been asked that question by a peer, and that's a really generous thing to do when you see a peer struggling, to say, how can I help you? Can I take that off your back? Can I go get your lunch today? Because I know you're overwhelmed. These are tiny things, but little by little, you can chip away and they realize you're not a threat. You don't want their job. You want a lovely environment from which to work. And
Yeah.
so, how can I help you be comfortable with me in that arena? I don't want anything you've got except if it can help all of us do better.
I love how simple that is because a lot of times I think what happens when we're in a leadership position, and we start to think, maybe try to think through what could I give this person? We put on these blinders of money or
Yeah.
or promotion, and it's not that those are meaningless. It's just that I've found very few people are actually motivated by money. Like I came from a sales background. I am coin operated as any sales guy you've ever met, and I've led
Mhm.
salespeople that are as well. And yet, I think in my entire career, I've known maybe two or three people who are genuinely at their core motivated by money. And that's
Mm.
thousands of salespeople I've worked at this point. Most of us are motivated by better work life balance,
Mhm.
by more financial comfort, meaning I could pay for my kids' college
Yeah,
education. I don't want money. I want the thing money gets me that's meaningful in a valued different
exactly.
way. We're motivated by a bunch of different things. And so it doesn't have to be this blinders. And what you used was example was Could I grab that person a coffee
Yeah,
proactively? Could I learn what their coffee order is so that someday in the future I could show up generously and do
beautiful.
so in an accurate way? Those are minor things that,
Yeah,
to your point, repeatedly being expressed build trust, because that's
exactly.
consistency really does that really well.
Relationships happen at the speed of trust. Stephen Covey. I love that. And Eric, I went to church years and years ago, and we were given these big buttons to put on. It was Labor Day weekend. I know why I work. And it was exactly what you are getting to. It was you can answer that question, but you can't say money. And if you will reframe why you work, you will be grateful for the chair you get to sit in for 8 to 10 hours, for the computer keyboard. You will be happy to be part of this community because it is giving you the vital things you
Mm,
want out of life. It's not drudgery, it's a treasure chest,
yeah,
right?
great perspective. It made me think. So I have a funny story about something similar to this give back to move forward, right? And being willing to ask those questions. When I first got promoted and took over my sales team, I had 16 people across 3 states. I was the youngest guy on the team.
Uh,
Shouldn't have had the job. Most of them wanted it, didn't get it. I did instead. Natural semi-antagonistic environment, especially with
yeah.
a bunch of type A sales guys. And what happened, one of the things that regularly happened to me was that my boss, after a few years in this leadership role, would call me out of the blue and dig into particular projects we were pursuing. We had to know about all the construction projects over 3 states. So there was a lot. And he would just call me out of the blue and start asking me
Mm,
details about something, right? Which like disrupted my day. I never knew why he was asking. I didn't have a lot of trust flowing that way. So I genuinely didn't know if like I gave him the wrong answer, if I was going to get my butt kicked verbally or whatever.
yeah.
I didn't want to have those conversations. And so I started doing this thing with my team, thinking, I hate it when my boss does this to me. So I'm never going to do that for my team.
Uh-huh.
Meaning, I decided anytime I have project specific information that I need or want from them, I'm going to give them a heads up. I'm going to send them an email or a text message saying, hey, later today or tomorrow, I need to get this information. Sometimes they would push it to me. Other times I'd call and chase it down. But I thought, gold star, Erik, you're doing such a good job being a better leader, is what I thought.
Hmm.
Sure, it did have some good impacts, but a couple years into doing that, I finally had the courage to ask my team, hey, what could I do to be a better leader for you? This was something my coach had helped me realize. And I finally had the courage to go one by one and ask them that question to try to really customize how I was showing up for the individuals that I led. And I'll never forget this because it was a critical moment. One guy had an instant answer.
Mm,
Like, you ask that question, hey, what can I do to be a better leader, Pattie Dale? And you might sit back and think about it in the flow of conversation. No, this was instant answer. Like this person had been prepared to answer it for a long time and had been sitting on it. And what they said was stop sending me those emails and text messages ahead of calling me about these projects.
mm.
And I was blown away because again, me thinking I'm a gold star leader for this thing, never expected that would be something that was harming my relationship with somebody. And I said, why? You got to tell me more, man. Like,
Mhm.
sure, why? And his response was, every time you send me that, it makes me feel like you don't trust me enough to think I know my own business and that you don't think you could call me and I wouldn't know enough. It insults me every time you do that. Knock it off. I was like, it
Ah,
blew me away that like my best intention was having
mhm,
such an unintended consequence because I acted before I asked. And
mhm.
going back to your wisdom of 30, 60, 90, learn before you do. I should have asked this question long before I said how I was going to lead people. But like that question, how can I be a better leader for you? Or is there something I can do to take something off your plate? Has profound impacts you can't even begin to anticipate. And you might hear some things you don't like along the way, but it's an important step in repairing damaged relationships or building trust.
It really is. And the difficult position you were in with 16 people to lead, you also had one of every variety and one of every color, right? So what he was so irritated by, somebody else could have been just like you. I'm so glad he gave me the opportunity to look at this before. So you can't find that out without asking.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't, you could do it either way. You were a leader who it was it, yeah, if you want me to just pick up the phone, I'll just do that. But yeah, you were I got you. That was a lesson that got braised into you, wasn't it?
Oh man, it is. And the reality that you can show up uniquely for different people and it's not hypocritical, excuse me, not Hippocratic, medical. It's not hypocritical
Yeah.
to show up in one way for one person and another for other. It's not hypocritical to show up and hold someone really accountable to something over here because that's what they need to grow on their journey.
Yeah.
That's what gets them aligned with where they're going and what they find value in, and to let it slide over there because that
Yeah.
individual, that's not the right place to apply pressure in their world right now.
Right.
That is really high level leadership that no one teaches us that. You kind of have to live through it, that period of discomfort of recognizing if I show up the same way for everybody, I actually probably harm at least 50% of them. Is a
Yeah.
hard lesson to learn.
It is. And where I go, Eric, is we've got a North Star once we walk through those doors, and that is the work to be done.
Hmm.
That is the service to the client. That is the service to the stockholder, whomever you're in service to. But like you said, there I have the beauty and the bounty of working with people. Nobody has the same background.
Hmm.
So therefore I need to hit their foreground the way that they will receive it best.
Ooh, that's well said.
And that's what you learn. That's not the fluid brain. That's the I've been there, and I got my sales guy had an immediate answer, so I'm never going to forget that again. That's a roadway in the brain that I won't forget.
Yeah, it sounds like it's really formed a good groove there that's worth sticking with. Um, Time flies when we're having fun, Patty Dale.
I
We're kind of
know.
here. Any other words of wisdom, perspectives we haven't touched on, or something that's maybe emerging recently, something that's hyper present in today's world, maybe not a couple years ago's? Anything you like to share as we wrap up?
So yeah, I would say that the one beautiful gift we haven't talked about today that a leader can give those she or he is fortunate to lead is confidence, right? If I have confidence, I'll move forward and get the work to be done. And hopefully I'll do it in just the very best fashion. But if you tear down my confidence routinely, I'm going to be afraid to make a move. If you tell me exactly what to do and how to do it, because you think you could do it better, I'll just wait until you tell me what to do. I won't have confidence. For the whole system to work the way it could optimally work, I think you have to have confidence, you have to have generosity, and you have to have authenticity of what you're good at and what you're not. And those are the three things that to me make the world go around. And we didn't hit on confidence too much.
That is such a great point. If you take the dictator role or the micromanager role or the I'll solve all your problems for you role, you never empower people to develop that confidence on their own. And they
Yeah,
learn that the boss will take care of it, which means they don't take ownership. And then you're frustrated with them and the whole negative cycle goes down. It's a really good point, and maybe fodder for another future conversation where we
I'd
can
love
dive
it.
into these things.
I would love it.
Patty Dale, if somebody wants to connect with you, if somebody is finding what you're doing powerful and they want to strike up a conversation, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I have a website and it's super easy. It's my name, Pattie Dale Tye, Pattie, Dale Tye, Tye, at pattiedaletye.com or
Fantastic.
pattiedaletye.com. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll put a link to it in the show notes, and
Thank you.
thank you. We'll put a link to the book as well. I hope everybody goes out and grabs it because I don't know many people who would say out loud, "I want to be ordinary, not extraordinary."
Yes.
They might need help
Ex-
figuring out what extraordinary means to them, and I think your book could be a great pathway for somebody to find that. Thank you so much for coming on, and thanks everybody for
thank you.
listening.
Thank you, Eric.
You got it.